Welcome back. You're watching Upfront. Today we present the first in an occasional series of interviews with great thinkers of India about what they make of the Modi government as its 5-year term comes to an end and how they view the election campaign that's presently underway. And we start tonight with the well-known historian, author and columnist Ramchandra Guha. Ram Guha, before I talk to you about the election campaign that's underway, let's talk a little about the Modi government whose 5 years are ending. What is the overall impression, the overall assessment you have of this government?
Well, it started promisingly, particularly because the last few years the UPA were uncertain, wayward, with no direction at all. The office of the Prime Minister had been seriously weakened, and Dr. Manmohan Singh was replaced by someone who had energy, who had ambition, who exuded authority. But I think it started to unravel fairly quickly. For one thing, it was clear that all power was centralized in the PMO. There was very little with the ministers. And this sowed the seeds for some later decisions which were clearly arbitrary and ill-conceived, demonetization being the most important. But it started certainly with promisingly, because let us not forget how directionless and meandering the last few years of the UPA were.
How is it ending?
We are now in the beginning of an election campaign which is extremely divisive and polarizing on all sides, and new depths have been plumbed in the language used by all kinds of parties, not just the Prime Minister, but particularly the Prime Minister because he holds the office. So it's hard to say how it's ending because we don't know what will replace it. But let me just make one point. When Mr. Modi ran his last election campaign as an insurgent claiming the throne in Delhi, he focused on inclusiveness and economics. So it was Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, jobs for the young, money in bank accounts, and now it is all, very different. It is all suspicion, paranoia, Pakistan is bad, Muslims we can't trust, we're not sure about the Congress party. So his last campaign exuded hope and optimism and did not play the communal card at all. And this ongoing campaign of the Prime Minister as an incumbent is very different and much less wholesome than the one he ran as an insurgent.
I'll come to the campaign and the themes that Mr. Modi is enunciating in a moment's time. Let me first put to you a couple of areas where the BJP believes the Modi government was a cut above and superior to its UPA predecessor. To begin with, Mr. Modi came to office promising a clean government. And if you set aside the suspicions about Rafale, where, to be honest, there is no smoking gun or money trail, there's been no T2G or Colgate, Augusta Westland or Commonwealth Games. Would you accept this has been a clean government?
It's been a cleaner government, at least in terms of large-scale, big-ticket corruption, and also probably in terms of small-ticket corruption. I mean, in previous governments, you would have had a lot of intriguing at the level of ministries, bureaucrats. That has largely gone. That said, there's a lot of opaqueness in the funding of the party that rules this country. You know, the election bond schemes, some of the dodgy decisions benefiting the Ambanis from TRAI, the recent awarding of lots of airport contracts to the Adanis. So, you know, there are some questions to be asked about what precisely is the funding mechanism by which the party and the government functions. But day-to-day corruption has certainly decreased.
And you therefore say it is a cleaner government?
It certainly gives the impression of being a cleaner government. Absolutely.
A second area where the BJP is proud of the Modi government's performance is in the economic sphere. GDP is growing at about 7%, inflation is under 3%, the fiscal and current account deficits are well in control, and the reserves have reached a peak of well over 400 billion. At the same time, you've had fairly important reforms such as the Investment and Bankruptcy Code, the Real Estate Regulation Act, Ayushman Bharat, electrification of villages, LPG for people below the poverty line. Do you think the BJP is justified in being proud of Modi's economic performance?
Well, they've done all these good things that you've talked about. But set against that are the colossal disaster that was demonetization, which broke the backs of many small businesses, made farmers greatly vulnerable. I mean, the agrarian distress that you're seeing now is a continuation of what started in November 2016. You're seeing job losses across the board, and you're seeing something else. You're seeing for the first time in our history as an independent country, doubts being cast about the veracity of government statistics. You know, and I think that is deeply worrisome because unlike China, unlike totalitarian regimes, we prided ourselves on the accuracy and reliability of our government statistics. And here there is a question mark, so no one believes the government's figures anymore.
You know, when you put in the scales demonetization on one side and all the so-called good the government claims they've done, which I recited, on the other, which is heavier, demonetization?
I'm not an economist, Karan, but I wish there was some reflection on what a disaster demonetization was and some open acknowledgement. The fact that the Prime Minister never mentions it as one of his achievements tells you what he thinks of it. But you know, I leave it for expert economists. I mean, I really am a commentator on society and politics, so I
But
don't
you're
want
of
to.
the opinion that demonetization did enormous damage to the economy and to the jobs of ordinary people.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that is well documented.
A third area where the BJP is proud of the Modi government is they say Mr. Modi came to office promising strong, decisive leadership, and this was very welcome to Indian people after the vacillating indecision that we'd seen under Manmohan Singh. He's leaving office having convinced the people he was a strong leader. Do you accept that, or do you think perhaps this is one area where he's tipped into being didactic, autocratic, and even almost dictatorial as far as his cabinet is concerned?
You know, we don't run a presidential system, we run a prime ministerial system. Manmohan Singh gave too much power over to his cabinet colleagues, and Modi gives too little. You know, we need credible, efficient cabinet ministers. I'll give you one example. There was a news report about 3 or 4 weeks ago, unfortunately the media didn't pick it up. There are more than 100 research institutes under the Indian Council of Agricultural Research. Some 60 out of these 100 are headless, they don't have directors. Now, the vast majority of Indians depend on farming. Not the vast majority, but still a majority. You know, these are the institutes that have laid the foundation of green revolution, food self-sufficiency. They deal with millet, grams, pulses, vegetables, and they, you know, our scientific infrastructure is justly well regarded around the world. Why are half the directors' posts vacant? Because Mr. Modi won't trust the agriculture department or the agriculture minister or the agriculture secretary. Likewise, if you look at the ways in which many appointments have been held up. So I'd say, you know, fear of allowing other people to make decisions is the flip side of so-called strong leadership. We run a collegial cabinet system of government. If Manmohan Singh lacked a spine and lacked authority, our current Prime Minister centralizes too much in himself at the cost of wise decision making.
Let me come to two areas where people have grave concerns about the way Mr. Modi has run this country. And the first is what I call the mood of the country. In the last 5 years, we've had Ghar Wapsi, Love Jihad, Bharat Mata Ki Jai, Gau Rakshaks, Namaz controversies, attacks on Dalits. And many people have come to the conclusion that under Modi, India has become a majoritarian and intolerant country where nationalism trumps liberalism and Muslims and Dalits are marginalized. Do you share that view and concern?
Emphatically. I mean, this is something I feel deeply worried about as an Indian, as a Democrat, as a believer in our constitution, as a biographer of Mahatma Gandhi. Over the last 5 years, India has moved more and more towards being a Hindu first and Hindu only country, just tragically mirroring Pakistan. And Mr. Modi has looked on as his party president has made the most vile and repugnant statements about Muslims, as the chief minister from his party who runs our largest state has said the most obnoxious things, including yesterday, you know, having people accused in lynching cases in the front row of his speech. And this has been deeply worrying and bodes they're very grave forebodings for the future of our country. Because if India was founded on one principle, it was we are not a Hindu Pakistan. And that is something we are, you know, there's a, as the Pakistani liberals say, tum to sirf bilkul hum jaise dikhle. Now we look to you as a beacon. We thought Pakistan can aspire to be plural and tolerant like you are, but you've turned out just like ourselves.
A second area where people have deep concern about this government's attitude and handling is Kashmir. In the 5 years of Mr. Modi's government, the number of terrorist incidents has increased 300%, bomb blasts has increased by nearly 350%, and last year, the number of local Kashmiris joining militancy was the highest in a decade. And at the same time, it seems the Indian government has alienated an entire generation of young Kashmiris. And yet, the Modi government doesn't seem to care. What do you make of this?
Well, I think they have Kashmir is cannon fodder for them to get votes in the rest of India. And this is again a great betrayal, not just of the Kashmiri people, but it's a betrayal of the mandate that Modi sought. You know, I was in Kashmir in 2015, a few months after Modi had come to power. There had been floods in Kashmir. there was great hope around the Kashmiris, because the Kashmiris had reason to distrust Nehru, who jailed Sheikh Abdullah, Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi, who dismissed, who rigged an election and so on. They are no great friends of the Congress party. And they admired Vajpayee for holding out the hand of friendship and insaniyat. And they thought Modi has come again with a clean slate. He has promised us that he will give us flood relief. The first thing was to give adequate flood relief, but that didn't happen. That was followed by excessive attack on violence used on protesters. It was followed by the lynchings in the other parts of India, which social media rapidly took to the Kashmiris, which gave them the sense that as Muslims they were not safe and secure being citizens of India. So this has been, the Modi government has pushed the Kashmiris against the wall. And again, maybe they think like the Israelis, they can, dump on the Palestinians and survive as a secular and democratic country elsewhere, but I think they're mistaken.
Let's come to the campaign as it's unfolding in front of our eyes. And let's begin with Mr. Modi. I get the impression that rather than campaign on the basis of his 5-year track record, he's building concern, if not fear, about India's vulnerability to terror, the threats India faces from Pakistan, and presenting himself as the only politician capable of defending the country. Do you share that impression of the Modi campaign?
Very much so, because he doesn't talk about what the government has done. Even some of the schemes you talk about, which have had an impact, such as Ujjwala, are hardly mentioned in the election campaigns. It is creating a fear of the other, presenting himself as someone who will save the country from terror, from foreign enemies, from sometimes unspecified dangers, and never talking about what he's done in the last 5 years, or attacking the Congress for what they have allegedly not done in the several decades preceding his coming to power. So it's a very strange campaign for an incumbent to run. I mean, it's a kind of campaign an insurgent should be running, but it is odd.
In contrast to Mr. Modi, the challenge before Congress, and I suppose the opposition as a whole, is to shift the national agenda away from Pakistan and nationalism, Balakot and terror, back towards issues of rural distress and unemployment. The Congress's Nyay scheme, launched exactly 7 days ago, was intended to do that. In the 1 week that people have known about it, is it having an impact? Is it beginning to convince people about the issues that matter?
I've been away, doing field work in Kumaon the last week since the Nyay scheme was announced. So I can't comment on what the feedback is on the ground. But if you go back to the earlier phase of the Congress campaign, I think they were badly advised to focus so much on Rafale. They needed a change of bowling. Rafale was not getting wickets. It had to be replaced by a bowler called agrarian distress or joblessness or promises to the youth that were betrayed. And for some strange reason, Mr. Rahul Gandhi went on and on and on about Rafale. I mean, it's as if he wanted to avenge the stain on his father's reputation because of Bofors 30 years ago. So I think the Congress has run, until recently, a rather puzzling and directionless campaign by focusing on precisely the wrong things. Because when all is said and done, by and large, when it comes to big ticket corruption, the record of this government is better than past governments. There is nothing by which Mr. Modi himself can be accused of personal corruption. He can be accused of many other things. He can be accused of not fulfilling the promises held out of jobs, particularly to the young. He can be accused of deeply polarizing society on religious grounds, thereby undermining the very future of this country. But as I said, it's as if the Congress has just put on the wrong bowler to get the batsman out.
One of the challenges that the opposition faces is that they needed to stitch together effective, meaningful alliances so that as far as possible, they could give Modi and the BJP a one-to-one fight. And the second challenge was to come up with an alternative agenda to offer in competition to what Mr. Modi is offering. Do you think they've succeeded on either front?
I don't think they've succeeded. Though whether the election will reflect the fact that there is no coordinated, coherent opposition to Mr. Modi, whether that will impact the elections or whether the elections simply be disaggregated 29 state elections and 543 individual constituency elections. But there are some, the Congress clearly has one eye on 2019 and one eye on 2024.
And is that creating a problem?
Well, that's in the short term, yes, but one can understand why the Congress feels that it must rebuild itself as a national party and hence hope that the discontent against the Modi government will manifest itself in a substantial reduction of the seats in the BJP, but at the same time not make it a classic united front against Modi election, but think of a ways in which, in the short to medium term, the Congress can rebuild itself as a
Let
national
me
party.
rephrase what you said about Congress having one eye on 2019 and one on 2024. Isn't this akin to trying to ride two horses simultaneously which are pulling in different directions? On the one hand, they want to ensure that Modi doesn't come back to power. On the other, they want to maximize the number of seats they can win. And the problem is that those two are pulling them in different directions and they could get
Well,
torn in between.
I think that's a question for the Congress party to answer. Perhaps what they want is a weakened Modi, not a Modi out of power.
And that gives them more time to prepare to
Right.
24.
A weakened Modi on the one side, a weakened BJP on the one side, and a modest revival of the Congress party on the other side. And so that over time the BJP weakens further and the Congress revives more. And that gives them space to build a government on their own. Now, one doesn't know what the results will throw up, but I think clearly the Congress party, I mean, to expect the Congress party to completely submerge its own interests for a short-term gain of dethroning Mr. Modi is, I think, asking for too much. And in some states particularly, I think, for example, in Kerala, where there's a lot of outrage among left-wing intellectuals at Rahul Gandhi's decision to contest in Kerala. All right. Now, if you look at the history of the left and the Congress, in 1942, the left did not support the Quit India movement. In 1948, after India became independent, on Stalin's orders, they launched an assault on the infant Indian state. In 1962, when China attacked us, it was not clear where they stood. More recently, when it came to the nuclear deal, they sided with the BJP against Manmohan Singh. So why should the Congress trust the left? And what kind of betrayal are we talking about? So I think there are areas in which these calls by those obsessed only with seeing Modi out of power, these calls for a united front where everyone must cooperate against the BJP and Modi in every single constituency, there must be one candidate everywhere, I think has not understood either the lessons of history or what the Congress is trying to do to itself for the future.
Let me in that case ask you, what is your opinion of Rahul Gandhi? In 2014-15, people spoke of him as Pappu, the Prime Minister who used to call him Shehzade. Then there was a stage when people regarded him as an absentee politician. And I've done interviews with you when you weren't convinced that he had what it takes to be Prime Minister. He's shed much of that old image when he became Congress President. But today, is he ready to be Prime Minister, or do you still have a few lingering doubts?
No, I have several doubts. He's clearly got more energy, more focus. He's taking fewer holidays abroad. He's much more on the ground. His speeches seem to be have more punch, more direction. But, I personally find the idea of a fifth-generation dynast running India's greatest and oldest party repugnant, and so do many others. That is a burden he'll have to live with, and the fact that he's brought his sister in to assist him complicates matters even further. Now, it may be that he has good advisors around him, but I can't really see him as ready for Prime Minister.
Not ready as yet.
Not ready. I cannot see him as being ready, regardless of the fact that even if he was not a fifth-generation dynast, he has no administrative experience at all. Why, for example, did he not join the Manmohan Singh government in 2009, take a ministry of his choice, like, shall we say, rural development or health, and run it well? Here is a person, his father had flown planes for 20 years, had worked in an office, had taken certain responsibilities.
Rahul hasn't even done that.
Hasn't even done that.
So he's utterly unprepared for the top job of the country.
Absolutely. I have no doubt about that.
Let's come to the regional parties. One of the regional leaders that has impressed the media and perhaps the public enormously is Bengal's Mamata Banerjee. And it's very notable that in her manifesto, she's gone out of her way to stress national issues like Kashmir, NREGA, highways, a vision for the railways. How do you see the role she's obviously trying to play in national politics?
I'll come to that, but let's not dwell too much on her manifesto because nobody reads manifestos. All right. But Mamata is very interesting, Karan, because in terms of her personality, she's quite akin to her nemesis Narendra Modi. She's completely self-made. She was working class, she had no patron in politics, she clawed her way up. She has incredible energy, incredible drive. She's a terrific orator. At the same time, it's all about her. She's as authoritarian and as megalomaniac as Narendra Modi. I mean, it's Mamata equals Bengal, just as Modi equals India. So it's a very interesting contest of two people whose personalities are very, very similar. She clearly hopes to be Prime Minister, and her hope would be that outside the Congress and the BJP, the TMC has the most number of seats. But again, it's hard to see other people trusting her. Assuming that there is a non-BJP government, it's hard to see other people trusting her with the top job.
So you think hard as she may try, it's not likely she'll get it?
Yeah, I think it's very unlikely.
The other dominant Indian woman in politics is Mayawati. And once again, what I said about Rahul Gandhi and Congress might even be true of Mayawati. On the one hand, she's determined to do everything she can to defeat Modi in UP, which is why she's allied with the Samajwadi Party, who used to be rivals of hers. But on the other hand, she's opposing Congress in Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. She's opposing the Gathbandhan as a whole in Bihar, and she refuses to allow Congress to be part of the alliance in UP. And all of that can only help Mr. Modi. It can't make things worse for him. So is there a certain conflict within her?
No, I think, both Mayawati and Mamta are looking at the example of Deve Gowda. Deve Gowda, I think, if memory serves, had less than 20, certainly less 16, certainly less than 20, his party, then the Janata Dal, not the Janata Dal S, the United Janata Dal, had less than 20 seats from Karnataka when he became Prime Minister. If memory serves, they may have had 16. Now, I think what Mamta and Mayawati are looking at is, let's maximize our strike rate in our states. Mayawati is fighting 38 seats. Mamta is fighting 42. I don't know whether she's going to give one or two to the allies. She'll say 40. So 42 probably. So if we are, either of us is above 30, we become a player in the prime ministerial stakes. And that's, Mamta seems to have a larger vision, at least symbolically. So she held a major rally in Kolkata several months ago, to which all kinds of leaders came. She now joined Chandrababu Naidu's rally in Andhra yesterday. So in that sense, at least she's giving the impression of being an all-India leader while seeking to consolidate the seats she wins in Bengal. Mayawati is just looking for getting as many seats in UP and then saying, if Deva Gowda could have been Prime Minister, why not me?
Do you think Mayawati has a certain angst or axe to grind against Rahul in particular?
I have no clue. I have no clue. I can't comment on that. I have no clue.
Let's come to the media. We have only about 5 minutes left. I'm talking about both print and television. For tens, if not hundreds of millions of Indians, it's the media that will bring home how this campaign is faring, what are the issues, what are people saying. Is the media being analytical and honest, or is it being partisan and less than fulfilling?
Well, I think my concern about the media is not, of course, there are some credible accusations that it's nervous and scared of the ruling government, and many sections of the media don't show unflattering stories. But my concern about the media currently is that it's too obsessed with elections. What happens between elections, what is the state of the economy, of society, what are the consequences of this poison of communalism entering everyday life, how does it impact school children, what about the growing evidence of environmental degradation that undermines our economic prospects. These are the things that are not covered at all. It is only who is going to win in which constituency, which state, and by what margin. And this obsessive focus on elections all through, not just in the last few months, but over the last 5 years, and with every state election, what's going to happen. I think the media does less than justice to what Indian democracy is all about.
And during this particular election campaign, is the media making an effort to actually identify issues and question leaders about those issues so that we get some sense of where they stand on things like employment and distress? Or is it simply going with the flow, the tutu meme of what they say?
Mostly the latter, though there are honorable exceptions. I think there's some excellent websites, and I personally like to get my information much more from the websites than either from television or from the print media.
So in a real sense, at a time when we needed the media to be analytical, informative, and truly bipartisan, it's letting us down.
I think so, without question. I think we do not have the media we would like to have.
My last question, if it were to be another 5 years of Mr. Modi, how would you view that?
Well, I think it all depends. I think if it was to be a Modi government in which the BJP has to depend substantially on allies that can tame its excesses, contain its bigotry.
This is a weaker Modi.
That's right, that's right. I think that would be good for India.
Good for India.
Not good for India, much better than the India we have now. I think a Modi government in which the BJP is close to the majority will bodes ill, because there will be a sense of triumphalism, and all their awful, nasty politics will seem to be justified. There may be even more persecution of its critics. So I think I'm not a great fan of a minority coalition of 18 parties.
You're not.
I'm not. I don't, people talk, but I can see the vulnerability there.
So your preference is
Not a preference. I'd say certainly, I mean, I'm just an individual, I cast my vote, but I'd say a Vajpayee kind of BJP.
where the Prime Minister is kept in check by the fact that without his allies he can't form a government.
That's right. So, and he can't, for example, this kind of naked bigotry of an Adityanath goes down very badly in South India. So if, and with good reason, because we in the South believe that are not so enthusiastic about dumping and beating up on minorities. So if a new NDA government relies substantially on allies from South India, it will be a much more humane government than the one we have presently.
In short, a weaker Modi could be a better Modi for India.
A better India, certainly. Yeah.
Ram Gua, a pleasure talking to you.